Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ranger Shop. So in this episode we're going to discuss installing a straight axle into our Rangers. Now if you're looking just for information about the different types of axles, that sort of thing, I encourage you to take a look at the video up here, up top. I'll link it up top. And that just goes over why you might want to do this and what types of axles you might want to install depending on what your end result, what you want. But in these episodes, we're going to do a few different episodes just because of the size of them to download them to YouTube. What we're going to do is we're going to cover how I'm going to do it in my Ranger. Because it's different, right? Everybody's different. Whether you want to put big axles, like a Dana 60 with big 44-inch tires, that's different than what I'm doing. I'm just going to be putting in half-ton axles, a Dana 44 and a 9-inch. And I'm going to do roughly what I'm shooting for is between a 33-inch to 35-inch tire size. That's what all I want. So let's get into it. Let me show you what the plan is for my truck. I've been ordering parts like crazy. We've got a lot of this components here. There's still going to be more that I need to order, but a lot of it's going to depend on when I tear down the axles, what kind of damage do I see, and then we'll get into that. But come on, let's take a look at the truck and see what we're going to be doing here. So here's the axles that I've got that I'm going to be installing. Now just to show you what I mean about how I got to tear them down and see what parts are needed. Notice here, so this is the long axle shaft I pulled out, but you can really see how damaged the seal area is there. So I got to look in to see whether I either speedy sleeve it, like put a sleeve over here, or do I replace the axle? I'm leaning towards just sleeving it, but we'll get into that. So I got to pull that side out, see how damaged this one is too. I think what happened is the Dana 44 was left upside down, probably in a puddle or in the snow, and it just you can see in there how much rust. It just filled it up with water. So unfortunately. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. All of the internals are getting replaced. The only thing that I really need out of this is the caps and the axles. So I'm hoping that I can fix, or I'm hoping that I can get a speedy sleeve out of there. So the plan for the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to install the front end, because that's really dependent. Everything else is dependent on that. That's what I want to set as my level, and then I'll just make my back match the front. I don't think I'm going to be using the high steer just because I lose this much clearance on the upstroke from your suspension. Because right there you can see where the radius arms are going to clamp on there. And so they're on there. And look at how much higher. You're like another 4 inches higher to this high steer. And I don't think I'm going to need it because I'm not running the height. But we'll leave it on there for now. And then if we got to take it off later, we'll take it off. That doesn't matter. We'll knock the knuckles off and do that. You can see it was originally, well, you can see the guy that was running it before me, he was running in a TJ, so a Jeep. So he put leaf spring mounts on it. We'll cut those things off, get that all out of there. Same with that one. So basically what I want to do is just get this axle down so it's just the tube and the housing, and that'll help me as I'm installing it under there, making it nice and light for me to lift. There's the 9-inch. Again, same thing. It's going to need the purchase cut off and installed. Anyways, we'll get into that. Here's the parts I've got so far. So down here we've got calipers, rotors, pads, and then there's the steering box I'm going to be running. It's a 79 F-150 steering box. It's mounted external to the frame, make it nice and easy for me. I'm going to be installing just the stock radius arms, from a 79 F-150 into this. I'm not going to extend them or anything at this time. I'm good just with that. I don't want any extra work more than what this is already going to be. I've got the brackets in there for those radius arms where they'll bolt onto the frame, and then I'll probably build a cross member in between them. Here's my springs. They're 3.5-inch lift early Bronco springs. There's the spring buckets. They're from Barnes 4-wheel drive. They're adjustable. You can see the part you weld on, and then you adjust it, clamp it, and then weld them all together. I was thinking what I'm going to do is put my bump stops in the middle of the spring, down there somewhere. We'll see how that works. And then these are F250 Dorman shock brackets. So that's pretty self-explanatory. That's a Yukon limited slip that's going to be going in the Dana 44. Up here's just all of our parts for the Dana 44. We've got the gear set, track bar, mounts, seals, bearings, U-joints. These are the C bushings for here. I think I've got their 4 degree right now. I'm hoping that's going to be good. New hubs, new ball joints. And then what I'm going to be running for steering is 1-ton Chevy tie rod ends. So that's what those are. Dust shields. What else we got here? Oh yeah, front drive shaft. This is a Cherokee front drive shaft. So up front, where this is, where it bolts to the axle down there, I'm going to probably order the rear axle out of a rear axle of a Jeep Dana 44 will fit into this Dana 44, and it'll allow me to run the 310 U-joints, so I don't have to run the conversion U-joints. For this end to bolt to the transfer case, you know how the Ford Ranger transfer case is. They're the round, this kind of style. I'm using this bracket, this adapter here. There's the part number, Powertrain Industries. And I'm going to be swapping out this whole end piece. So I'm going to swap that out and put that right in there. And then that's going to give me, hopefully, I think, a really nice looking drive shaft, front drive shaft. For the steering, this is out of an E250. This will bolt to that. This will bolt to that, down there, I guess, to that steering box right here. It'll bolt to the steering box, and it'll bolt up onto my Ranger, my existing Ranger. The front brake lines, I think I just ordered the set that's factory for the Dana 44, the 79 Ford. I'm going to stick those on there, I think. It's just simple, easy way to do it. Let's go take a look at the 9-inch stuff on the other side of the room. So for the 9-inch, we've got a gear set again, rebuild kit, all the seals, the bearings. We're doing, again, a limited slip. I think these are drums, shoes, hardware. I don't know if, oh yeah, and then I bought this as a Barnes 4-wheel drive 9-inch swap kit. That's got some good, those are some really good long mounts for the springs. I think that really helps to prevent spring warp. And then exhaust system down here, we'll put that in later. So right now I've got the 3-inch body lift on here, and what I'm thinking is I'm going to be pulling out that 3-inch body lift. That'll drop it down 3 inches, and then I'm hoping I'm going to go up 4 inches or 5 inches with the suspension. So that'll come down 3 inches and then end up going up actually a couple inches more, probably about the thickness of that lip. And then that'll make it level with the back the way it is right now. But I'll drop the back down, and then I'll use the rear shackles, and I'll lift the back a bit to match whatever the front is here. I just wanted maybe a little bit of a rake, but not much. And then that's going to be what I'm going to shoot for. So I think right now we're good. I'm just going to leave the body lift in right now. We'll take that out once I've got this all stripped, and we see what it looks like. Okay, so we got all the brackets now taken off the frame. I haven't ground it down. I got to grind down all the welds, and I need to make it look pretty before we plate it. But before I do that, I want to do two things. First off, I got to strip down the front axle, see whether there's any damage. Then what I want to do, once it's stripped down and probably as light as possible, I'm going to just slide it under with the radius arms on it, and I just want to see where everything's going to line up. So let's get that done. Okay, so I've been tearing down the axle. I pulled the high steer off the top there. Again, I'll keep it, and if there's room, I'll use it, but I just don't think there's going to be room. And then I pulled the axles out of the tube, disassembled both sides. I'm going to take the carrier out of here, make it nice and light. Here's the axles. So you can see the kind of damage that's done to the sealing surface here. It's quite rough. But I think each axles, it's a couple $100 each. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install some speedy sleeves on here, and that's going to fix this up. I'll show you how we're going to do that later on. We'll get to that. But I've ordered them. They were kind of expensive, but everything's expensive now. I think it was $30 a piece, but still better than $200 each axle. The axles are in good shape other than that. The outer looks good. I just got to clean this off, make sure there's no pitting here, but I don't think there will be. Okay, let's finish taking this apart, slide it under there with the radius arms, and see what it looks like. So I just got my laser level out here. I'm just straightening up the axle, making sure it's straight to the frame, and then also position the same distance either way. But that looks pretty good right there. I'm hoping that this will be probably about an inch or two higher when it's resting. So that gives me about 7 inches to the frame. I'm thinking I might just keep these leaf spring pads here, just cut them up a little bit, and mount my bump stops to them. The drive shaft's in there. It's very, very close. Like maybe an inch might have to come off the drive shaft. We'll see. I don't want to place the axle just based on that drive shaft, but at the same time, it'd sure be nice if it just fit without having to cut it down. And then if anything breaks, I can always use just a factory drive shaft. Here's the springs. But anyways, it seems like it'll fit good. These are the brackets I ordered for the radius arms, and I think those are going to fit on there nicely, just like that. I got a 4-degree bushing in it right now for setting caster, and I'm just going to check that right now. So what I got is I've set up my laser level just on the center of the axle, and now I'll just measure. So I'm just eyeballing this right now, and I think we've got about 9 degrees caster right now, which is good. Anywhere between 6 to 9 is what the Dana 44 what it wants. And if you're looking at the pinion there, it looks like a good angle. It's going straight back to the transfer case good. And also, I still don't know, because once I get that's got to obviously be trimmed up and cut and everything mounted up and tight there. Then we'll see exactly where this caster is. But I think I'm going to stick with the 4-degree. Anyway, so everything looks good. I think all the parts I have are going to work. Springs, the mounts, the arms, the degree bushings, the drive shaft. So I'm going to clean up the frame now. We're going to buy a plate to put over top of here. I'm going to clean up back there where this other mount is going. And then I think I'm going to plate that also. Put a little plate in there. So I've got everything ground off here, and it's all ready for the plate. On this side, the plate's not going to go as far forward because I only need a plate where the coil spring is. That's where I'm trying to stiffen it up a little bit. But on the other side, we've got our power steering pump. Let's go over there. So this is 3/16 plate. It's 5 inches, and I've got it quite far out here. But I'm going to just cut it to size, and then I might cut a little bit off the end here probably. So I'm just going to score the back of it now. The bottom's pretty good. So the top, I'm just going to score the back of it, cut it, drill a few holes in here too, just to get it so that the center is also welded on. And then what we'll do is I'm going to tack it on, and then we'll fully weld it. I got to fill in a few of these holes, like this little bit of a dip here where the shock was before. So we're going to cut a piece of plate, stick it in there, and weld that in also. Plates on there, each side. You can see I just ground it down, put the plate on, and then I just did 3 of these kind of tack welds in between the plate and the frame. And also near the bottom, like where this opening was here for the shock that used to slide in there, I left the opening here open, just a tiny little spot, just so that if there's any moisture that builds up between this plate and the frame, it'll come out there rather than rotting everything out too badly. So just a few of the things that I do when I weld anyways, is especially with this where it's a little bit thicker metal on thicker metal. And my machine is a 220, but it's not a powerful 220, it's just a cheap Chinese welder. And what I'll do is I do like a stitch kind of weld. I'll burn forward just a little bit, like maybe 1/8 inch forward, and then I come back and I fill. Then I go forward and I come back and I fill. Forward, come back and fill. So that's why you can see, like, it's not stacked. They call it dime stacking or whatever. It's not stacked super high. But also the reason for this is that I went with the highest heat possible. I feel that there's never such thing as too much heat when you're welding, unless you're blowing out the metal, and you'll know that right away. But with something this thick, there's no such thing as too high of heat. So I just crank the heat, and since I don't really want to be grinding all this, I don't feel like grinding all of this, I crank the heat and I put my wire to just where it'll almost lay flat. So you can see in there, there's not much to grind there. There's the edge here, and then it's flat right across. The plates are on, that's good. I've also cut off down below for my mounts, for the rear of my radius arm mounts, so that I can get that done. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to just focus on the steering box. So I've got the steering box mounted roughly where I want it, how far forward, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to sleeve these holes. I'm going to sleeve these holes with Dom tubing. So I'm using 3/4 inch outs OD, and that leaves me a 1/2 inch inside diameter, which is perfect for these bolts. The way it's working with this box, since it's so huge, is I'm going to be sleeving both of these, but this one down here will be below the frame. So it'll be just below the frame, and then I'll reinforce it with some flat plates just to make sure it's nice and strong. So that's the next project right now. Just make sure I've got this exactly where I want it, and then start drilling. Also, if you're drilling this plate in your frame, what I like to drill with is a step drill. I know it sounds weird, but it's just easier sometimes than an actual drill. Just try it. Drill your holes with a step drill. Just get the step drill the size that you want, your final size. For the frame here, I'm going to have to drill all the way through with a proper drill, but then I'll widen it out and chamfer it a bit with the step drill. Let's get started with that. So these are drilled out 3/4, and then I pounded the tubing in here. So again, that's 3/4 tubing, 1/2 inch inside, and that's perfect for my bolts. So now it's just sticking out a little bit here. I'm going to just weld all the way around here, get some decent penetration into this plate, and then I'm going to grind it flat. That way, if you were to pound it flat and then weld it, sometimes you can get weld inside the hole, and then you got to drill it out. It's a pain. This way, there'll be no weld that's going to get inside that hole. The bottom bolt I've just got tacked on there right now, but I'm going to put a plate here and a plate here. Just reinforce that. Okay, so that's our finished product. I've ground it down to where this and this one, they're all level when the box is sitting on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the box, have that sitting on there. That's done now. And then we're going to go to the back and work on these back brackets here. I'm going to add a piece of steel, a piece of 3/16 in there, and then we're going to attach those brackets onto this frame. So just working out these brackets here for the radius arms,
And it looks like I need to space them out from the frame about this distance. It's about 1 inch. So I've got this 2x2 1/4 inch wall square tubing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it in half. And then I'm going to use that almost like a C and mount it to the frame there. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just laying out the frame basically on the concrete. I'm making marks where different components are. I don't know if you can see those, probably kind of faint in the video. But I'm using my laser level, just marking it out. So this is marked straight with the frame. Then I've marked out the center of the rear axle back there. And then I roughly marked out up here where the control arms were. So then what I found, which was quite interesting, is that these body mounts are way off. This one's probably about 1 inch further back than the other side. Everything else in the frame, like even the hole here and stuff, I could tell when I welded this in that it was like that, because this hole was different compared to this. Even this piece of metal under here for the transmission cross member, it's not quite the same either side. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking my laser level anyways, is I'm marking out the frame, and then I'm marking out critical components like the rear axle, making sure that the rear axle is going to track the same as the front axle, and then making sure that both of them are square to the frame. So marking it out on the bottom and then doing a cross measurement from one side to the other. So from the point of this to back there, the center bolt of the axle there, then doing a cross measurement, just making sure that everything's square. And then we're going to, what I'm doing here, as you can see, I'm just bolting these in. That's how I like to do it. I like to bolt and then weld. So I'm going to bolt them in, and then I'll also weld the whole bracket in also, but it's going to have both bolts and welds. So that's pretty good. That's roughly how I want it to sit, just as ride height, right about there. That'd be perfect, I think. That gives me about 5 or 6 inches up travel before it hits my bump stop that I'm going to mount up here. And you can see how everything lines up pretty nice. And right now I've got 9 degrees of caster, which is good. That's a lot of caster. So up front, I'm going to run my track bar right in between this space here. It's going to be this side of the frame, because you want the pivot to line up with the center of the steering gear here. That's what's going to stop, and this is you want this at the same angle as your drag link. So the same angle that the drag link's going down to the steering, you want the same angle for your track bar. I still got to put a cross member in here. Remember, I've got my hitch on the front that's welded in, so that is definitely holding the frame rails pretty solid. But I want this braced right in here where the motor mounts are going to, and where all the tension and everything is from the components that are in here. So here's my cross member. And I'm going to have that slide right into where the track bar mount is here on the frame. So it's going to come up, be welded onto the frame, and then tied into the cross member. And then down here is where it's going to be bolted to go all the way down to the mount that's on the axle. I've cut this at a little bit of an angle. You can kind of see how one side's cut more than the other. Because up here, I want the track bar to tilt like this. I want it to sit in there like that, so that it'll clear my diff cover as that bar goes down and out there. Okay, I just want to show you this before I weld it up. So you can see I notched the front here so that the whole cross member is tilted forward a bit. And that was because of my track bar bracket here. So I've tacked this on here because I want to drop this now. And I want to weld that completely solid. So I'm going to weld it all across the bottom and then on the top also to this cross member, so that this is really, really strong, because you don't want this breaking. And then once I get that welded on solid, I'm going to bolt or clamp this back on, and we're going to weld this in permanently. Okay, so I just want to walk you through this. Again, I'm no expert, but I put a lot of time and thought into this, and I think it's going to work out pretty good. But I just want you to know my thinking and how I'm doing it, And again, it'll be different for everybody because it's however you want to set up your truck. If you want it jacked way up in the air, you're going to do it a lot different. But I want this to be nice and low, and I want to use up the full amount of travel. So you can see the diff right now, it's tucked up right in there really nicely. I might be able to go up another 1/2 inch to 1 inch before my bump stops will hit, but it's pretty close where it is right now, full compression. That's where I'm building everything, full compression. So a couple things that you'll see. First of all, you got my cross members in here. I just got it tacked in for now. There's the track bar mount out here. And then coming down here, this is just a piece of PVC just so I can try and get my angles right. I've got my tie rod end. The link here is done up. This is just the old one that came with the axle. It's going to be all replaced, but it helps just to give you a general idea of where components are going to be. You can see how I can't put, I don't know if you can see that one or this side, but I can't put the steering on the top because it'll be running into everything here. So it's going to be lower, just the way that it is stock factory. So it's going to be on the bottom. I'm going to put 1-ton Chevy tie rod ends on it. Now here, I'm just doing my link. I bought this bracket, but again, this is just from Barnes, 4-wheel drive. It's just giving me a rough idea of what I'm going to use. I'm going to be chopping this all up, hacking it up to make it fit my application. The one that I'm using is actually, I think it's only 1 5/8 inch, but I got a 2-inch Enduro joint that I'm going to be putting in here. So anyways, first of all, I need to get this positioned right. So I'm just sliding this thing up in here, and you can see that right about there, it looks pretty good right about there. The thing that you want to line up is your drag link from your pitman arm down to your tie rod end here, and your track bar link. So that's what I'm doing. And also, you want it fairly level. The more level it is, the less chance of a bump steer. You know, you won't have it as it compresses, moving the whole axle over one way or the other as you're driving down the road, you know, the whole thing shifting. So that's kind of, it doesn't really matter too much to me because I'm not going that high. It's going to be pretty darn close to level, pretty close. But the thing that I'm worried about is I don't want to hit this cross member here. So I'm going to trim up this bracket so that it just fits just underneath this cross member. And then this cross member is going to be kind of my top point of where this link is coming. So it's going to be bolted down almost in line with the axle tube itself, which will be almost in line with the Y-link, the tie rod end over here. So let me get this to the grinder. I'm just going to grind off the top part of this, try and fit it in there. And then the bottom part, I've already kind of beat it with a hammer a little bit, trying to change it to fit what I want. And then I'm going to grind this up. These ends, like the wedges, you can weld on these. This is forged steel. So you can weld, but it's very difficult. You got to have a lot of heat. So you got to have a very powerful welder, or you can preheat it and then weld on it. That works. But anyways, that's just something to keep in mind. Like, you can weld on this, but it takes a lot of heat to weld on it. On the tube, you know, I can weld on the tube just like normal metal. Okay, let's get this done. Let me get this kind of fit up how I want to put in there. Okay, so I've got my track bar tacked in. I've got the mount tacked in. Everything's rough right now because a lot of it depends on my ride height, trying to achieve my ride height. So I've got these adjustable coil buckets from Barnes. They're a weld-in, but you can slide them up and down. These little brackets get welded onto here, and then you can slide the bucket itself up and down. But what I want to do is I want to get that square to the top of the frame, even though the axle right now is like this. And so the spring buckets down below are like that. They're angled like that. So whether I have to shim those to make them straight, or once I get it under compression it'll be good enough, we'll see. But first off, I just got to get this spring bucket in the right spot. So a few things that I'm running into is the spring bucket itself, because I want it fairly high, because again I want my truck fairly low. This spring bucket right here is getting very, very close to my steering gear, the universal on my steering gear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this old flex joint off of here just to see the spacing, how much distance I need from the back of here to the steering gear. I might have to trim this out, like cut this out, and then plate it inside here just to give it just a little bit more clearance. Or if I drop it down lower, then obviously it'll clear because of this. But I'm not going to sacrifice my ride height just because I don't want to plate this. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to kind of play around with it a little bit, slide this up and down. First off, I just notched this out of here, and I'm going to weld that in, because what I've done, you can see the center line here. I don't know if you can, but I scribed the center line of the axle. So that's where it, and I've got a scribed center line on the bucket. And so I know roughly where that's got to be. And then I'm going to weld the one side in. And that's going to lock in that side nice and straight. And then I'll start fooling around with all this other stuff to make sure that I can fit it all in there. Okay, so I've got this welded in there solid, and it's looking good. I like how it's all coming together now. It seems to fit together nice and tight, and yet there's good clearances with everything. Next step is I'm going to stick the springs back in here, get it compressed, sitting on some jack stands, and then I'm going to go work on the back. We're going to fit that 9-inch in now. Okay, so I got the axle all cleaned up, ground off the old mounts. Looks like this has had a whole bunch of mounts, because looks like there was one here which was ground off, and they ground it way too deep, unfortunately. But anyways, we've got these other mounts ground off here, and also the shock brackets. Just cleaned it up a little bit. Now I'm just going to slide these axles out, just those bolts in there. Remove them, slide the axles out, strip it all down, clean it all up here, and then we're going to just slide it under there and get it in position. Okay, now I've got this centered in here. Basically, I just measured from the block here, because the block fits right in the pin that goes through the leaf pack, and it's really tight fit, so that's pretty much bang on. So I measured from the block over to the flange here, and right now I think I've got it just 9 3/8, I believe, is the measurement. And then just to make sure that this spring pack is not crooked one way, like this way or that way, I just checked to make sure that those U-bolts were at 90, which they are. So that's good. I'm pretty confident that I've got it centered this way. So now I need to set my pinion. And basically what you do is you match this to your transmission. Now, what I'm going to be doing is, since I'm taking out my body lift, I'm going to be dropping my rear shackles. Like, I've got those adjustable shackles, so I'm going to come down 2.5 inches, and then when I drop my body down 2.5, that'll make it all. It'll be about the same height as what I want, or same height as the front. So to do that, I need to drop those rear shackles first before I adjust my pinion height. Otherwise, what happens is, as you drop the rear shackle, it increases your pinion angle, increases. And then what you have is you'll have a vibration. So what I want to do is get my leaves bang on where I want them, like this is it, and then I adjust my pinion angle based on that to match. And then what we're going to do is we'll just tack weld this in here, and then drop the U-bolts, get everything off, lower it down, and then weld it in really nicely. One thing I just forgot to mention too, I just wanted to mention, is you want to set the pinion angle based off of ride height. Right now the leaves are fully decompressed, it's just hanging, but when these leaves are riding, they're pretty close to being flat. So what I need to do is get my jack under there and put the weight so that it's almost taking the weight off these jack stands, and then I'll know, okay, that's good. And then as long as my pinion angle is good off of that, that's what I want. So I just wanted to show you what I was talking about earlier with the pinion angle here. So you can see I got the jack under it. I've got the weight on the springs. It's just light on the jack stand, so it's ready to lift off. So this is the ride height right here. Then I check the face of the pinion here. If you check the face of the pinion, 84, 83, yeah, 83.8. Now we'll check the angle of the transmission. As you can see there, we're at 83.6. So it's close, but I could raise the back just slightly. I might just tap it up just a little bit. See if I can bring it up closer to 83.6. So we've got 83.9, 84 still about the same. See, just a few more taps. So there we go. 83.6. That's perfect. Okay, I'm going to tack it right there. Okay, so I got my track bar mocked up in here and everything's just tacked. You can see down there it's all just tacked and just, you know, small bolts, everything just kind of holding it in place. But now what I want to do is cycle through the suspension, the full limit of the travel. Just make sure nothing's going to bind. Okay, so you can see here, that is really, really close. It's only got about a quarter inch between the track bar and the diff cover, but it's still got a quarter inch. I'm good with that. The whole axle's sucked up. I don't know if you can see in there, it's kind of tough, but you can see where the old leaf spring mounts are. So in between here, it's got maybe, I don't know, 3 inches before it hits the frame, and that's roughly where I'm going to put my bump stops anyways. So right now that's full stuffed and everything's looking really good. So that's it. Now I'm going to just drop the axle out, take the radius arms off, and then remove the steering box and just weld everything really solid, because a lot of this is just tack. And then I'm going to get this thing ready for paint. I'm going to clean it up and paint it before I rebuild it. So the axle is all ready to go for painting here. I got it all ground down, and I'm just going to clean out the tubes. Just look at all the stuff that's in that tube. I don't know if you can see that actually, but it's full of even rocks. So we'll blow that out, clean it all out really well. To paint it, I'm just going to use this Rust-Oleum or trim clad here in Canada, and I'm adding this universal hardener to it. This just makes it dry quick, because I don't know if you know, this stuff really takes a long time to dry, especially when it's cool out. And also it gives it a nice hard finish. So I always add that to it. Well, I'm going to paint this, put it over to the side, and then while that's drying, I'm going to go over and weld up the cross member solid, and then grind down where the steering box is going to mount, and then we're going to get this ready for paint. I'd like to have everything painted by the end of today. Okay, so our steering box has been rebuilt. Also, I got new return lines and also supply lines. How I did it for my power steering lines, the pressure line especially, is I ordered a new Ranger supply line and a new 79 Ford F-150 supply line. And then I just took those two lines down to the hydraulic shop and they just joined them two together. So this is their hose, hydraulic pressure hose. And then also I asked them to just put it on swivels. So until this is locked down, you can swivel it, put it into the position you want, and then you can lock it down here. Really simple. It took them about 20 minutes. They also, you know, hydraulic, a lot of hydraulic shops, not all of them, but a lot of them will also do your AC lines. They'll do power steering lines, brake lines even, everything that you could need. And I think this cost me about $60 to get that done. So that's pretty good. And it took the guy maybe 20 minutes to do. He just cut off both ends, the one off the Ranger, the one off the F-150, and then spliced them together. So today what we're doing is first of all I'm going to clean off the paint off of here. I also painted the frame. I figured while I was on here, so I scraped it, ground it down, and painted it. But now for these spots here, I'm going to grind them flat, grind off the paint, and same on the back of the power steering gear here, because I want it to be metal on metal. I don't want the paint to wear off and then have a loose box. After that, I'm going to get this power steering line connected and the return line connected. Okay, for steering, all my tie rod ends are going to be the GM 1-tons. Anyways, you can Google and see what you want to put in your own vehicle, but this is what I'm going to do. I've got the reamer to ream out my pitman arm here. The way that I have the steering box set up is I can't install the pitman arm without tilting the steering box up, and then I can install the pitman arm and tilt the steering box back down. So it's just the way that it worked out for me. So I'm going to ream this out, get this on the steering box before I install it. So how I'm going to do it is basically, you can see it's just a different angle. This is a GM angle, and compared to the Ford it's just a little bit different, but it goes in but not quite all the way, and you want enough of that thread sticking through so that I can put that castle nut on. So I think I'm going to take it in as far as this taper. You can see that taper there. Take that in, ream that out until this nut's going to go in here. I'm going to ream this out until that taper's gone, basically. Let's give it a shot. That's looking pretty good right there. Taper's just about all gone there, and it'll be perfect for that castle nut here. So a couple things with this I learned is it actually reams very quickly, but you need some good cutting oil. As soon as the cutting oil is on it, nice and smooth. Let's get into this, and what I'll do is I'll just try and hit the high points as we're going along so as to not bore you too much. Okay, so I got my bearings off, and I was able to take them off without damaging, except for one. So one bearing I've got damaged, so I'm not going to be able to use it. But the other bearings, what I've done is I've just ground this out very slightly with a burr, and that's going to allow this just to slide on, just like this. Here's the pinion bearing. You can see that I kind of ground it out. It's tight fit, but just slides on. So that'll allow me to set my pinion depth. It'll allow me to do a lot of things and get it bang on without just having it close, because I don't want to pull the bearings off again. So that's it. I've got 9 thou backlash, which is towards the high end. I think the spec was 7 to 10. And my pattern's okay. If you can see there, it's hard to see. Anyways, it's a good pattern. Both sides are the same. And so I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to pull the carrier out and install the axle seals, and then just get moving on here. Get the axles and the hubs, everything put back on. I'm just going to speedy sleeve this now. Sand it 150 and then 240 just to make sure it's real nice and smooth. This is the speedy sleeves I'm using. They're just generic one. I just measured the size and then ordered them. You could get wider ones, you know, that cover the whole distance. But really the sleeve's only running right here. You can see, I mean, the seal is only running right here. You can see where it's running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the speedy sleeve just to about here, because it's narrow, right? It's a little bit narrower. So I'll install it to about here. And to do that, I just cleaned it up really good with some brake clean and then use some green Loctite on it. And then to drive it on, I just found this piece of tube, and it fits right over the sleeve perfectly. It won't damage it because it's plastic. Okay, now that that's on there, you just take a pair of side cutters, just snip this, and then very slowly peel it off all the way around. Here's how I do my U-joints. So all the caps off, obviously, so they don't fall. And then I press it, whichever one I'm going to start with, I press it in further than flush, so that when you put this one on, all the needle bearings will be seated properly as you're pressing it in. Otherwise, if you leave this one out here, then either side this cross could shift, and then the needle bearings will drop and you'll have to pull it off, do it again. I just wanted to share this because I messed up and I thought, save you from messing up. So what happens is I'm just installing this U-joint in the axle, and you can see this clip here is already bottomed out, but this one you can't even see. It's not even visible. And I think why this happens is the cups got rusted in, and as you're pressing them out, you're actually squeezing this axle together here, and then it's deformed so it doesn't fit the new U-joint. So what I did is I thought, oh well, I'll just push here with my ball joint press, push it through. This will just bend a little bit, and then I'll be able to slide this ring in. But it's not. What happens is it blows this cap off here, and then the U-joint's wrecked. So I got a new U-joint, and this is what I found works really well now. Puller here, I got my little 2-jaw puller, and then I've just got this plate, and I just put that on there like that, set my 2-jaw puller on here, and then just give it enough pressure to set this cap basically in there. And I put my ring on there first, then put the pressure on there, it pulls it into shape, pops into place, and it's actually got good tension then on the U-joint itself, which is pretty good. Okay, so I got this thing all cleaned up. I put in my new needle bearing, and then it's got a seal right there, and then this thrust washer fits in there, and then this whole unit. Oh, and then in there we got another dust seal that was replaced also. So I've got my new dust shields on here, and now I'm just going to slide this thing onto there. So I thought I'd just point this out too, that if you can see right in here, I've installed a grease fitting in here. So these axles originally, they didn't come with a way to seal the axle from the outer tube. So this, I'm just going to pump this full of grease. It'll seal this up. A little bit of grease will come out here, but no big deal. That's going to be my solution. I'll keep you posted whether it works or not. But I think at least it'll keep the salt water and stuff from getting down in the tube. Okay, that's looking pretty good. That's all done. Diffs in. I did another pattern check just to make sure, and also I checked my backlash. We're all good. So this is set. I've got my rotors on, my bearings packed, new bearings installed, but I forgot to order this seal here. I don't know why I did that. They're pretty cheap. But anyways, so that's coming in a couple days. To keep going, I'm going to rebuild the drive shaft now. Okay, so this is our drive shaft all done. We've got our new CV joint in here all rebuilt, and then U-joint in this end, everything's greased up. I like to try and orientate all my grease nipples to the same spot so that when it's sitting, you're looking down on it, or you're looking up at it, you can get to the grease nipples. Also, there's the one that's right inside there too. So that's a different type of, it's a little grease needle to get that. Anyways, so let's paint this up and get it on. And look at that drive shaft. Doesn't that look like it's just factory in there? That's beautiful. Highly recommend that adapter. I'll post it. I'll try and post all the links in the last video just so they're all in one video. But let me show you the CV joint underneath. And look at that end. Doesn't that just look like it's factory? It's beautiful. Just like it was built for it. Also, you don't have that big extension that other adapter gives you, so I don't have to cut the drive shaft. I've still got an extra 1.5 inches here of play. Okay, we're going to wrap up this video here. I'm just going to give you a quick tour through what I've done so far to the front. I just want to stop here because there's so much content, it's crazy. I got to get editing this video, and I know you guys want to see this too, how far I've got. And I also actually would like your input. So if you notice something that maybe you should just tweak that a little bit or change that, then let me know. If it's something like get extended radius arms or something, well, I'm not going to do that. But if you've got some good suggestions or tips, definitely let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know maybe the style that you're doing, the solid front axle that you put in, and how you went about it. But here, let me just give you a little bit of a tour of what's been done. Yeah, so if you got any tips, you let me know, and stay tuned. There's still part 2 coming out, and that's going to be the rear diff install, which it's already in there, but the rebuilding of it, getting it all set up, and also taking this body lift out. It's 95% done. I just got to basically jack it up, pull the bushings out, but I kind of wanted to do my headers and stuff before I did that. And then basically just we'll do a walk around once we're done. So I'm really hoping within the next 2 or 3 weeks this is going to be done. It's taking a lot longer than I thought, but it's usually because I've got sidetracked into other things. You know, like I got it into it and I thought, well, maybe I should rip that exhaust out and put my headers in. And then, oh, you know, let's take the body lift out. And when I got into there, it's like, oh, okay, well, let's pull out the carpet and then reseal everything and add some sound deadener, and everything just grows, right? But honestly, this is a lot bigger job than I thought at first. You know, I am a mechanic, but it's different. This is fabricating. It's different than mechanicking, just throwing parts on a vehicle or diagnosing and changing stuff. This is a little bit more involved. So anyways, I think you can comfortably, you know, say even work on it full time. You're looking at maybe a month. Working on it full time, you probably could get it done in maybe 3 weeks to a month, but I wouldn't be expecting to bang it out at a weekend, that's for sure. Maybe if this was one of twin traction beam front ends, maybe be a little bit easier, but especially with these independent suspension and everything you got to do. And to make sure you're doing it right? Who wants to rush this? Let's make sure it's done right. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.